What can the Eagles take away from their wild card loss? Are the Bills the team to beat in the AFC, and has Matthew Stafford hit his stride again? All that and more on today's episode of Chalk Talk. Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 39 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well. We had a couple days to kind of distance us from that Eagles playoff loss here before we did Chalk Talk. So now, I'm out of, wallowing in self-pity after the loss. Now we move on to draft season, and it's the off season officially. And this is truly, honestly, my favorite time of the year. I love really getting into the draft. Really, this has been like, I've obviously, you got, as you know, Shane, and as the listeners know, every week I've used my final thoughts to either talk about college football or the draft, or guys that are in college football that are going to be in the draft. And now I'm officially kind of deep diving, and I'm sure this podcast and a lot of the things me and Shane do on the Painted Lines for the next couple months are going to be very, very draft heavy, but not today.
Absolutely, and we are going to get into that. We're also going to carry this through the playoffs because, like I said, the Eagles season may be over, but the NFL season is not, as Mr. Crockpot chimes in and says, did somebody say draft season? We sure did. We're going to be getting into that as we go along with player rankings, mock drafts, all kinds of stuff. So you guys keep it tuned right here. Mock drafts, let us know what you want to see. But today we are reviewing every every NFL wildcard matchup. We're going to preview the divisional matchups, and we're going to play a little bit of matchmaker with some coordinators that should be getting head coaching jobs and the coachless teams. So we're going to start it off, as we always do, with the Eagles game. The Eagles lost to Tampa Bay 31-15. Mark, where do you want to start talking about this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you just have to look at the way that they started. And we talked about it ad nauseum for the second half of the year, that you're not going to be able to start slow in the way that the Eagles did in a lot of these games against bad teams when you play good teams. And you saw the Buccaneers were able to take a quarter of clock off. Basically, you take 15 minutes off the clock before we ran 10 plays, I believe. I believe that was, or 10 or 11 plays. I forget the exact stat now. It's been a couple of days, but they took 15 minutes off while we basically, I think we had 3 or 4 minutes at that point. And when you dominate the time of possession that early and you go up 14-0 that early against a team that's predicated on running the football, it's going to be hard to come back, especially against a defense that I think maybe I underestimated. I think a lot of people out there that gave the Eagles a chance, I think Vegas underestimated them as well. You look at the front seven for this Tampa Bay defense and the names that are on it. You see Shaq Barrett, JPP, Vita Vea, and Ndamukong Suh, Devin White, Levante David, and they're all out there and they're all healthy for the first time in a long time for that Tampa Bay Bucs defense. And I think you saw more. I mean, obviously we'll talk at length about the Eagles, but I think people were underestimating Tampa Bay, and this was kind of the exact reason I didn't want to play Tampa Bay. I think a lot of people were kind of mistaken in thinking that Tampa Bay might be vulnerable with some injuries, and then everyone that ended up being back on defense, and then the injuries and the weaknesses weren't exactly felt on offense.
Yeah, we said all along that you did not want to face Tampa Bay. Of course, both of our pick was the Rams, and we saw how that turned out for the Cardinals. So
that's true.
At the end of the day, the Eagles came into this game as a 7 seed for a reason, and those reasons showed up. They started slow. They really didn't get much going offensively until garbage time. It was not a good performance for the Eagles. And you look at the defense is where I start at. The Eagles, they came out and they sat back and they played the same soft coverage that we've seen all season that always got diced up by good quarterbacks until it was too late. I mean, they adjusted eventually. And, I saw people saying, well, they only gave up 17 points on the first 7 drives. And, that misses the point because they gave up a touchdown. The second drive, they get a 3-and-out, but they only got a 3-and-out because the receiver dropped a pass. I mean, it wasn't that the defense got a stop. It was a miscommunication between a seventh-string receiver and Tom Brady that was wide open. And then they go on another touchdown drive and then a field goal drive. So they did not stop the Buccaneers on any of their first 4 drives. The Buccaneers stopped themselves once. Tom Brady had a time to throw of 2.17 seconds, the fastest of any quarterback in any game all year. And the Eagles just sat back and let it happen. I thought the defensive game plan in this game absolutely stunk. I mean, everybody knew. Now, it's one thing to say everybody knows what you need to do to stop Brady. It's really hard to do. That's why he's so good. But to not even try to do what you needed to do, I mean, you know beyond the shadow of a doubt that he's going to sit back and dice you apart if you're just letting him do that. And it's what the Eagles did. And I didn't see the adjustments I wanted to see. Yeah, later they started doing some other things, but it can't be later. You can't stop. You got to stop giving teams spotting them the whole first half before you decide to put in a good game plan.
Are you questioning Broncos, Vikings, and Texans head coaching candidate Jonathan Gannon? Because I personally believe he'd be a great head coach to hire for any, if the Denver Broncos GM is listening, that's flying to Philadelphia, or, he might be brushing up on his Eagles podcast. He's like, oh, let me go listen to what they think of Jonathan Gannon. Hire him. He had a great game plan. He did a great job. Please hire him. No, I'm joking, obviously. And the thing that I said coming into the game that worried me the most was if you looked at the throw chart from the first time that we played Tom Brady, he went 29 for 30 for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns with no interceptions on throws that went less than 10 air yards against the Eagles. We played the exact same coverage. You can watch the film. They did the exact same thing to start the game as they did for the entire game the last time they faced him. It's hard for me to fathom. And, I think that both of us have kind of not crushed Jonathan Gannon as much as some others have, but it's hard for me to fathom when you have the film from a previous matchup against the same team that has less assets on offense than they did when we faced them. And you're like, oh, you know what we're going to do? The same exact thing that we got absolutely diced on last time we did it against them. It just, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing again and again and having it not work. And you see guys like Derek Carr and Justin Herbert pick it apart. It's a different level when you get to a guy like Tom Brady. I don't care who's out there. He's going to be able to figure out that coverage. And, I think I did feel a little justified in my season-long poo-pooing of the whole Darius Slay, people complaining that he wasn't an all-pro and people complaining that he wasn't getting enough respect and showing all the stats about the yards per game given up. He was playing 15 yards off Mike Evans. He's terrified to go up against a guy like Mike Evans, and the Eagles defense and Jonathan Gannon is terrified to throw a guy like Darius Slay up against a guy like Mike Evans because they know he can't cover him. And if you're going to trade the asset that we did to get Darius Slay and pay the amount of money that you paid to get Darius Slay, it kind of stinks that like 10 to 15 or even more than that, 20 to 25% of the number one receivers in the NFL, he like really can't cover. It's kind of a problem. This is a later on conversation, and I think it's something that people won't even talk about, but I'd love, Darius Slay's value is probably never going to be higher than it is right now. I would love to trade him for whatever you could get for him.
Yeah. I'm with you. And we're definitely going to get into some of that. Probably not today.
No,
but we will get in that down the road. We got to have an Eagles, segment next week. And so maybe we get into some of that, some more there, but yeah, on one hand, Jonathan Gannon, he does not have great personnel to work with. The Eagles don't have a safety that should be a starter in the NFL right now. Rodney McLeod is at the point of his career that he's a role player, but he's asked to play every down. They don't have a linebacker that should be a starter in the NFL, and they got like the least sacks in the NFL this year. And so, granted, he doesn't have the best personnel. And I'm sympathetic to that. And so if they keep him back, if they retain him next year, which it seems like they will unless he gets hired, I'm not going to be upset about it. I think changing schemes every year is a bad thing. I haven't seen enough this year to be totally out on him, but I'm not going to be disappointed if he does get hired away. I do think there were some some pitches he should have thrown here that he didn't. But it wasn't just him. The offensive game plan stunk too. And Jalen Hurts stunk, which Mr. Crockpot chimed in. He said, "What do you think about Howie saying today that Hurts is the guy in 2022?" Better question, do you believe him? Now, I already had my take about this out on Twitter. I said that means nothing because you would expect him to say nothing different. And I can promise you he's on the phone. He's on the phone making calls about trading for Russell Wilson. He is scouting quarterbacks. I think it's likely that Hurts is the starter in 2022. But between a team's season ending and the draft, I don't trust anything a front office says. What about you?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. The only thing that would give me a little bit of pause is the fact that last offseason they wouldn't give Jalen Hurts the starting job. So at least it is a step in that direction. And when it comes down to it, Jalen Hurts is Howie's guy. That is who Howie stuck his flag on and kind of ruined the relationship with not only Doug, but with Carson Wentz for. He was the pick that he was terrified to miss out on the next Russell Wilson. And for better or worse, he made the playoffs this year. So I do think there is a part of Howie that's like, oh, I feel pretty justified in thinking that this guy's a starting quarterback. Now, does he think that he can be a top 10 guy who can lead the team to a Super Bowl? I don't know. Does he think that he can go get a guy like Russell Wilson with the team we currently have and compete for a Super Bowl? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what Howie does, but the number one thing that I haven't seen people really point out about this comment, and it kind of goes along with your statement on thinking that it's a nothing burger. It really goes down to the fact that Jalen Hurts is probably going to be traded if they make that move. If they get it, if they draft a player or if they trade for a quarterback, you would hope, or they would hope, I think, that Jalen Hurts would be an asset that would allow them to not trade draft capital. Like instead of giving up, let's say a first and a third to move up and get Kenny Pickett, if that's really what they wanted to do, maybe they could trade Jalen Hurts and 19 to get up, or maybe they could trade Jalen Hurts and save a second round pick, or maybe they could trade Jalen Hurts a first and a third instead of trading 3 firsts for Russell Wilson or something crazy like that. So I think that they want to keep Jalen Hurts as an asset that is valuable to other teams. And the way to do that best is to say he's your starting quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't buy it. I do think he is going to be the guy, but I put no stock into how he's saying that right now.
Agreed.
But yeah, Hurts was awful in this game. I saw people online critical of the offensive line and critical of pressures. And I'm here to tell you the offensive line was phenomenal in that game. Per PFF, the Eagles' lowest graded offensive lineman graded out higher than the Cardinals' best offensive lineman in their game. Like, the offensive line was not the problem. The problem was Jalen Hurts creating pressure. There were so many times that, yes, Todd Bowles brought pressure, and the offensive line picked it up masterfully. And rather than stepping up and getting rid of the ball, or Nick Sirianni, rather than having a hot read to get the ball out against the blitz, we're running these long developing concepts, these flood concepts we've run all year, so nothing breaks open early. So he doesn't have a check down. And he doesn't stand in the pocket. He rolls out into pressure. I mean, you go to the one that I think it was Baldinger broke down with, where he missed Quez Watkins on that over route.
Yeah, everyone had, yeah.
I mean, yeah, everybody screenshotted that, and they said, well, there was pressure. That's why there was not pressure. There was no pressure until he rolled out left away from where the play was going, and he created pressure. He ran into a spy. He could have stepped up and got that ball out. And that happened a lot. It was an awful Hurts game, but it was equally a really bad game plan from Nick Sirianni.
I have another. I totally agree. It's a terrible game plan by Sirianni. It was a terrible game played by Jalen Hurts. Anyone that's blaming the offensive line, that's just, in my opinion, I don't want to be too mean, but I'll just say that I don't think that it's a very smart way to evaluate that game. The offensive line was in no way the problem. The one thing I will say, this is such a small problem, and this made me think a lot about the draft. I do think that our running backs are really bad at blocking. You could see on multiple plays. There was one play specifically that Jordan Howard was basically blocking 3 feet away from where Jalen Hurts was supposed to be dropping back, and it's like, how about you step up in the pocket and make a block there? I think it ended up pushing Jalen Hurts out of the pocket, or you could argue he would have left anyway. But running back,
I think Gainwell is our best pass blocking running back,
and they don't use him at all.
Yeah.
It feels like they completely stopped using Gainwell a lot of the they were so hot and cold with when to use Gainwell and when to give him snaps. It's kind of frustrating. But yeah, I was arguing with a friend today who is kind of like me, where he never wants to spend any money or spend any draft capital on running back. But I was like, honestly, I really do think they need to take one in the second or third round and let Miles Sanders go and kind of have Boston Scott and Jordan Howard not be as an important part of your running game, especially if you are going to move forward with Hurts. And I know that the counter argument is, we were really great at running the ball this year. We were first, and we did that with scrap heap guys most of the year without Miles Sanders. Well, how about we put a good running back with Jalen Hurts and a good O-line? It's kind of like people always argue with San Fran for fantasy football purposes. Like, oh, they can put anyone back there and he can run the ball for the 49ers and Shanahan's scheme. And we're seeing that with Eli Mitchell and Debo now. But how about, I always say, like, and they drafted Trey Sermon and he ended up getting hurt. But I always say, like, how about we put a good running back with that scheme and see how good the 49ers would be. But I think that running back is a serious problem for the Eagles, which is funny because of how good they were at running the ball, because I don't think they have a consistent receiver that you can use in, game out. I don't think that they have a guy that's really great at blocking at all. So that's a hole. But again, this is on Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni more than anyone on the offense. Both of these guys, Sirianni coached one of his worst games of the year, I thought, and Jalen Hurts played probably his second worst game of the year.
And much is made of a quarterback in their first NFL start. I haven't heard anybody talk about that it was Nick Sirianni and Jonathan Gannon's both first playoff game calling plays too. And so you factor that in somewhat too. I mean, ultimately, I said this on the post-game show, people are going to be reactionary. But at 2-5, if I would have told you that you were going to make it to the playoffs, people would have been ecstatic. If going into the season, I told most rational people that the Eagles were going to make it to the playoffs. Now, there were crazy people that thought they were going to go win the Super Bowl, but with a first-year head coach, a first-year defensive coordinator, with all the cap hits they had, with people saying they were a bottom 5 roster, with Chris Sims not even naming Jalen Hurts in his top 40 quarterbacks, like, people would have been excited about that. And so I don't think, obviously it's your last impression. I don't think people should be too down on what happened here. What happened on Sunday is you saw a lot of inexperience in the playoffs, and you just simply saw a roster that's better than the Eagles. The Buccaneers, as banged up as they are, their backups are better than what the Eagles had out on the field. And it's an indictment of how this roster has been constructed. And it's a problem that they have a chance to fix with so much draft capital and so much money coming their way in free agency this offseason.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of negatives to take away from this game. I think that there's a lot of things that make you reevaluate things that we felt pretty good about going into the game. But I do think, and I always say this with Philadelphia fans because they do get so negative, and I get negative during games, so I feel the same way sometimes. But you do have to remember, in my opinion, I think there's 20 plus teams in the NFL, like fan bases and in terms of organizations, that would trade their situation for the Eagles right now. With they do have some young pieces for the first time in a while, if you include Devontae and locking up Goddard and Avonte and a number of other guys, Josh Sweat and some other guys. Not that it's, we're not the most exciting young team in football, but I think that there's 20 plus teams out there that would rather be in our situation, especially with the 3 first-round draft picks. And the fact that Jalen Hurts, is something. It's not like we're in a Daniel Jones situation, in my opinion, where we have a bottom 5 quarterback in the league. I think he's perfectly average. Like I've said all year, I wish he was better or worse, so it would be an easier evaluation on what to do going forward. But I think he's in that 15 to 18th best quarterback range in football. And I think if you put him on a team like the Vikings, or if you put them on a team like the 49ers, those teams would have went to the exact same spot that they did. Like, I think that, just for example, those types of quarterbacks are in the same range as Jalen Hurts, in my opinion. So anyone who reacts to that game and is like, oh, Jalen Hurts is terrible, he's a backup, I think that's an overreaction. But anyone who defends him and says, oh, anyone who thinks about any other options at quarterback for the Eagles is disrespecting Jalen Hurts and he can be a top 10 guy, it's like, I'd pump the brakes on that too. So I get accused by a lot of people of kind of hating on Jalen Hurts sometimes. And then I get accused from a lot of people of being a Jalen Hurts apologist. But in reality, I think I'm somewhere in the middle, but there's no defending that game that he played. There's no defending the turnovers. And that's the thing I always come back to with Jalen Hurts. I always kill him on the games where he has turnovers like that you can't excuse, because if Jalen Hurts is going to work and the play style that Jalen Hurts has is going to work, it has to happen with turnover-free football.
Yeah, I mean, how much different is that game if he comes to that read in the end zone right before halftime faster and gets that out, and all of a sudden you're going into halftime 17-7 and you get the ball back? It's just a different game. But
they would have cashed my team total.
Yeah, you should never be too reactionary to one game. But seeing, the Eagles go on the run they did from 2-5 to 9-7 before that Week 18 game that didn't matter, we thought the Eagles became something. And now you do have to question, did the Eagles get better, or did they just play a bunch of nothing teams? Because they played the Bucs again and they got beat by worse than they did the time before. So it does make you question things. And we're in that wait and see mode. You wait and see what's going to happen with the draft, with the offseason. Teams' roster construction can change so much. I do want to point out, though, you mentioned young pieces. One young piece I'm really excited about, and it's not someone I was excited about when they drafted him, is Milton Williams.
Yeah.
I think Williams has flashed a lot this year, especially down the stretch. In the playoff game, he had 5 tackles, which he had in the run game. Excuse me. He had 5 tackles. He had 3 run stops, which was first. He had a 13% stop rate, which was 6th in the NFL over Wildcard weekend. He's a guy that has done really well. And I think it makes interior defensive line not really a need. It's something you thought about you might need. I think you've got the pieces there, and it allows you to focus on edge a little bit more in the draft and the offseason. So there's at least a positive to take away from there. All 3 of the Eagles' top 3 picks from this draft looked like they're going to be the real deal.
Yeah, it looks like they really did a great job in 2021 in that draft class, which is funny because I feel like no one's talking about that whatsoever, because every time the draft picks come up, the 3 draft picks come up, it's all about how he's going to mess it up. But I'm not going to defend Howie. He's made some of the worst picks we've ever seen. But Joe Chick here with a comment, my buddy Joe, he said, I think Howie said the right thing today, saying Hurts is your 2022 QB is the way to go. A most likely scenario, but you damn well know how he still got that wandering eye. Yeah, he definitely does. And then Mr. Crockpot, oh, my bad, Shane. Mr. Crockpot said, I'm 100% targeting 2 edge guys in this draft. So where I'm at on that, we'll get more into draft stuff later, but just real quick, I wish we could really go after 2 edge guys, but I think we've got so many holes that it makes it a little tough to draft 2 edge guys, at least with the first 3 picks. Maybe we can take another edge guy in the 2nd or 3rd round, depending on how the draft breaks, but the draft is so deep with edge rushers. Milton Williams is definitely a guy that makes you feel pretty good about the D-line. Landon Dickerson's also a guy that makes me personally, and I know Dives is going to disagree with this as well, just like I said with all those holes, I'm kind of not looking for an O-lineman in the 1st round as long as Kelsey's returning next year. And I know that we should be thinking long-term beyond Kelsey, but what Dickerson does, I think really does open up the chance to wait another year to try to find that heir apparent and try to fill other spots right now. Now, if they take an O-lineman, I won't go crazy, but with the amount of holes that we have elsewhere at receiver, at the end, at linebacker, at corner, at safety, at running back in the 3rd or 2nd round, in my opinion, it would frustrate me a little bit to go after a Linderbaum or a Kenyon Green or a Charles Cross, and especially if they took a tackle. And I know here's Mr. Crockbox's point about that Linderbaum and Stoutland's a near perfect match. I totally agree. Linderbaum's an awesome player. He's going to be really good somewhere. But I actually think you mentioned the reason that I don't want to go after a guy like Tyler Linderbaum. It's Jeff Stoutland. I know Shane disagrees with this as well, but we've seen what Stoutland's done with Mailata. We've seen what he's done with Opeta to make him serviceable. We've seen what he's done for Dickerson to make him good in his rookie year. Obviously, there's been other examples of him turning guys into something out of nothing, and that makes me want to kind of try to use resources elsewhere as long as we have Stoutland.
I want to make a point here, and we'll move on to the rest of the review.
Yeah.
If Kelsey retires, I would move heaven and earth to put Linderbaum on this team because he's Jason Kelsey 2.0. But he only plays center. And so if Kelsey doesn't retire, it's hard for me with the holes on the roster to justify using a 1st-round pick on a guy that won't play this year. That's a hard sell for me. And so that's where I come down. I love Linderbaum. I think he is incredible. I would have a hard time spending a first-round pick on him, though, if Kelce is back in the – because it's not like you're going to shift Kelce to guard either. And so you'd have two centers. You'd have two great centers. But anyways, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I have him as a top 15 guy. Linderbaum's awesome. Like I said, I struggle to want to take an O-lineman with one of these first three picks with all the holes on the defense. I really just want – and just before we move on, back to the quarterback conversation, I personally, if I probably had to make the decision, if I was the GM, like we will be in a minute, doing head coach carousels, I would say that I would probably stick with Jalen Hurts and use a lot of this money and a lot of this draft capital to beef up the defense, and see if Jalen Hurts can be the guy next year. If he's not, we probably will have enough resources the next year with the young players we picked, with the draft capital we'll have, and with Jalen Hurts to still be able to go get a quarterback in the draft or go get a quarterback that's available. And at that point, we could cash in those chips at a time when our roster would be a bit more ready to compete if it was a veteran or an NFL-ready rookie.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. All right, let's throw it around the NFL here and review these other games. We had the Las Vegas Raiders traveling to Cincinnati. Crazy game here. Probably one of the best games, or second best game of the slate. Cincinnati wins 26-19. Your guy, Joe Burrow, goes 24 of 34 for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. He led the Bengals to their first playoff win in 31 years, but that is not the story of this game. The story of this game is Whistlegate. And I don't know why I said that, because it just annoys me anytime media just adds gate to the end of anything. But the play where
what's your take? I'm curious.
Burrow is rolling out and he throws a pass into the back of the end zone, and the officials blow the whistle while the ball is in the air because I guess they thought he stepped out of bounds. He didn't. And then they go back and they look at it and they decided to uphold it. And they said that the whistle blew after the catch, even though you can clearly hear the whistle blew while the ball is in the air. And the NFL was basically like, yeah, we'll comment on it after the game because hopefully Cincinnati will win by more than 7 and it won't be an issue. And they didn't. Just officiating has been hilariously awful this season. And I'd never blame officials for the outcome of a game. So I'm not saying the Raiders should have won this game, but the officiating has just been so bad, and it continues into this postseason.
So where do you fall on it? What do you think should have happened?
I mean,
it's tough both ways. That's kind of my point.
Somebody's getting screwed. Is it 98% chance it's a touchdown if that whistle doesn't blow? Yes. Yeah. Is there a chance somebody could get there and make a play? I mean, by rule, the whistle blows, the play is dead. And that would piss me off to no end as a Bengals fan if it took a touchdown off the board. I think that's what you have to do, though. You blew the whistle, and I don't know. I honestly really just be competent as an official. You can always go back and review if he stepped out of bounds. It's a scoring play. Like, a coach doesn't even have to throw a red flag. It's automatically reviewed. Let the play out if there's any ambiguity, and then review it, in my opinion.
Honestly, once you blow that whistle, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. I think like either side, that either call you make. Imagine if you make that call and then the next play the Bengals fumble or throw a pick and then the Raiders win that game, and Bengals fans for the rest of the time are like, man, we didn't win a game for 31 years and then we got a touchdown taken off the board because some idiot blew his whistle when Joe Burrow was scrambling. I didn't even think, like, in live time, I thought it was a touchdown. Like, I didn't think he stepped out of bounds watching from home. Like, so, and I will say that I had money on the Bengals, so I'm a bit biased. I am a bit biased here, and I did too.
I had money on the Bengals.
I had money on the Bengals, and I also have a ticket on Bengals plus 850 to win the AFC. And I like the way that this bracket broke for the Bengals. I like the fact that they're getting the Titans next week, who are the most vulnerable one. We'll get more into that later, but I think the Bengals are rolling, and I think that a lot of focus has been paid to that Whistlegate and the fact that the Bengals, and we'll talk about this with another game, they kept driving the ball. They had no problem driving on Las Vegas, but they kicked too many field goals. They couldn't score.
Eight total field goals in this game between the two teams combined, which tied an NFL record for the most field goals in a game.
And it's frustrating. And we'll talk about it again with San Fran. Both teams, San Fran and Cincinnati, that ended up winning those games on Saturday. Yeah, no, Dallas was on Sunday. But Cincy and San Fran both, when they won those games, they could have won by even more, I felt like, because they kicked so many field goals and they kept driving. They had no problems moving the ball. But that kind of honestly makes me feel better about Cincinnati going forward. That I don't think we saw their A+ game. Like I think they played a B- C+ game and were able to handle the game and lead the entire game basically and beat the Raiders. So a lot of people are focusing on Whistlegate and maybe the fact that they weren't as impressive as maybe people wanted them to be. They won by a touchdown. They covered the spread. And I thought, like I said, I don't think that they played their best game. So I feel really good about Cincinnati right now.
Losing Trey Hendrickson really hurt them in this game too. I tweeted this out, but they pressured Carr on 10 of 23 dropbacks with him in the game. And then he left with a concussion and they only pressured him on 3 of 33 dropbacks without Hendrickson. So he was limited in practice, which means he's probably trending to play. So that's big news for them. Other little random nugget from this game is Joe Burrow this season has 4 of the 11 longest dropbacks on the year, including one in this game that was over a 7-second time to throw. Wow. So we talk about how the line can't protect Joe Burrow. Maybe they don't need to. He just runs around anyways. It doesn't even matter. He's like that annoying guy you play in Madden that just runs 30 yards backward and then jump throws it across his body.
But before we move on, I'll give you one last chance, Shane. I'll give you one last chance to jump on the Joe Burrow bandwagon with me against Justin Herbert and say Joe Burrow is the best quarterback from that draft class. Let me hear it. Come on.
I mean, Herbert wouldn't have settled for so many field goals. So Herbert would have probably put up 350 and 4 touchdowns, and it wouldn't have even been a game. Whistlegate wouldn't have even mattered.
But would Justin Herbert have looked as cool in the sunglasses after, or looked as cool during the game doing it?
Nobody beats Burrow's aesthetic. I'll give you that.
He's he's a
cool Herbert, being the man of integrity that he is, would have told the officials, "Hey, you blew the whistle. Just give it back. I'm going to throw another touchdown," and he would have done it. Would have even been a talking point.
Let's get to the next game because I think we're gonna breeze by this next game.
Yeah, New England at Buffalo. Buffalo just blows them out, 47-17. The Bills never turned the ball over. They never punted. They never kicked a field goal. They literally scored a touchdown every possession of the game except for the kneel downs at the end. It is the best DVOA offensive performance in the history of the NFL against the defensive genius, Bill Belichick. Josh Allen goes 9 of 9 on passes over 10 yards. He goes 21 of 25 with 5 touchdowns on the day. What did you take out of this one?
I thought it was a really, really good head coach interview for Brian Daboll. And I thought Josh Allen, it was one of those I'm here moments for NFL player, which is cool to see. I was rooting for New England. I had a future on them from way long ago, and I actually stupidly thought that they could win this game. And I thought this would be a close, low-scoring, grinded-out game. And that is me disrespecting Josh Allen, because if you look at the roster and you look at the pieces around Josh Allen on offense, I don't think that he has the pieces Mahomes has or an Aaron Rodgers has or some of these other quarterbacks have. I think Josh Allen's doing this a lot based on his own talent and off of Brian Daboll's creativeness. I think that they call really interesting plays. They let Josh Allen loose with his legs in this game, and he's able to air it out. He's been a lot more accurate on the short throws. Josh Allen is, the best version of Josh Allen is just as good as the best version of any quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah. And Buffalo's offense gets all the press here, but their D was phenomenal. They got an interception on the first drive, followed it up with a 3-and-out, and just like that, the Pats were down 20-0, which completely blows. The Patriots are like the Eagles; they don't necessarily trust their quarterback to win it through the air. They want to grind out games, and when you're down 20-0, when you're down 17-0 in the Eagles' case, you just can't do that, and it went off the rails for both of those teams. Allen became the third player in NFL history in this game with 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and less than 5 incompletions in a playoff game. You got any guesses as to who the others are?
Mahomes?
It's not Mahomes.
Brady?
No.
Wow.
Neither are
Rodgers?
current players.
Okay, I'm not going to get it then.
Peyton Manning and Kurt Warner.
Kurt Warner. I wouldn't have gotten Kurt Warner. I never remember him in stats like that. But
greatest show on turf back in the day.
Yeah.
Here's my take from this game, and we'll talk about it when we get into the preview, but I think the only person that can beat the Bills in the playoffs is Josh Allen. Like if Josh Allen plays at the level that he played, which I talked about on my preview, you never fully trust Josh Allen because he can turn in some stinker performances. If Josh Allen plays at that level, I don't think there's a team in the league that can beat them.
Yeah, I mean, if Josh Allen plays at that level, there isn't. But I think if he plays at 80% of that, it's still what 280 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns, and I think that Patrick Mahomes could outduel him if it came down to that. That game is going to be so fun. But the Bills' offense is so fun to watch, and good for Josh Allen, good for Brian Daboll, good for McDermott getting the Belichick monkey off his back a little bit there. Yeah, I mean that's a huge win for Buffalo, and I actually think it kind of is. We'll talk about more of that later. I keep wanting to give away things.
All right, let's move on. San Francisco at Dallas. San Francisco wins 23-17. Dallas scored 7 points in the first 3 quarters of this game. And they come back, they make it interesting late, and then they topped it off with the infamous QB draw with 12 seconds left instead of taking 2 shots to the end zone. I mean, the coaching in this game was just bad on both sides. Let me ask you this. Is there any coach that you trust less with a 4th quarter lead in the playoffs than Kyle Shanahan?
Don't do this to my guy, Kyle Shanahan.
Is there any coach that you trust less with a 4th quarter lead than Kyle Shanahan?
No comment.
His punt on 4th and 1, just cowardice. And then you get the ball back, and then you're going to go for it on a 4th and inches to wrap up the game, and you send your left tackle in motion, trusting him to get set and fight. He's never done that in his career, and you're asking him to do it on a 4th and inches, and they have to punt again. Just bad decision-making in big moments. The Cowboys fake punt ridiculousness. Like, you get the fake punt, and then you no huddle with your punt team out there. Like, they said later they were trying to get them to burn a timeout, but like they're just standing there with their hands on their hips. They know your punt team's not snapping the ball on 1st and 10. And then they forgot that you've got to give a chance for substitutions if they owe substitutes, and they take a delay a game. I bet they would have liked to have had that time left, at the end of the game. And then it all culminates with Dak and Mike McCarthy blaming the refs, which is just laughable. Just pathetic all the way around.
I'm going to push back on 2 things here.
All right.
First of all, let me just say, I think his name's John Fassel, the Cowboys special teams coordinator. He was the Rams special teams coordinator for a really long time. That guy has never ran a fake that hasn't worked. I'd love to see the stats on this guy. Every time this dude runs a fake and they show him going nuts on the sidelines and like holding everybody back, it works every time. At the Rams, he had Johnny Hecker, who, if you look up Johnny Hecker's stats on passing, I'm pretty sure they're like fantastic. Like, I'd actually be curious.
And the 49ers even left their defense on the field. They thought a fake was coming, and it still worked. It's just crazy.
Honestly, like, I would never hire a non-coordinator. Like, I think people hiring like Joe Judge and people hiring like David Culley and special teams coordinators and receivers coaches is always dumb. But I will say, if someone was like, we're hiring John Fassel, I'd be like, I'm in. That guy's a genius. That guy knows what's going on with fake punts. So that's all I wanted to say about that. The decision to leave the punt team out there was hilarious. Mike McCarthy's a moron. But I think that I'm willing to put a lot on Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore on that last call. I don't think Dak's calling a QB sneak.
No, I don't either.
Put it on Dak. I don't get the people putting it on Dak, or the people saying Dak should have went down 4 or 5 yards before. It's like, okay, like, I don't know. Like, I think it would have been hard to get that clock no matter what with the situation they were in. And the fact that the ref bumped into him is Dak's own fault for not giving him the ball. So that's irrelevant to me. And so a lot of attention is being paid to the ref and Dak. And I think more should be paid attention to Kellen Moore, who I guarantee has had the answer for this in interviews.
If you call a play in a playoff game that requires on the athleticism of a middle-aged referee to get the ball spotted, maybe you should call a different play. And honestly, what is the difference? Wouldn't you rather have 2 shots from the 40 into the end zone? Dak can throw the ball 40 yards. Wouldn't you rather have 2 shots there than have 1 shot from the 20?
Well, what about the fact that they ran 4 straight, like 15 to 20 yard outs and got down the field and got out of bounds 4 straight plays? Why didn't they try to run another 15-yard out if they were so intent on getting to the 25.
Well, the 49ers finally took away the sidelines, which again goes into that end of game management. How are you just giving that up? Like, take away the sidelines. Just the end of this game was baffling. By the way, I've got Johnny Hecker's career passing stats pulled up.
What's going on? Are they good?
He's 14 of 23
for 100. I thought.
Well, it looks like he had a year where in 2015 he was 1 of 4. So I don't know if Fassel was there that whole time or not. But anyway, 186 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception with a quarterback rating of 82.9.
That's pretty good for a punter. That's
the averages 1.2 yards per game.
But it really, and sometimes it's not a throw though. So sometimes they run some crazy direct snaps. He was the guy that was behind the watermelon kick for the Cowboys that fooled the Falcons. He's been behind a couple famous ones. That's another. I just sent another low blow at Joe Chick about the Falcons.
What's Joe saying was a low blow for me?
It hurt my heart. They won. Let's talk about how great Mike McCarthy is, though, giving CD. I don't know what he's upset about. Oh, is he a Shanahan guy too?
Joe, let me know in the comments.
Oh, he's a Falcons fan. You brought up Shanahan.
I didn't say 28-3.
But I think Joe was also a Shanahan guy too. I don't think he blames Shanahan.
Either. Shanahan is a good coach.
Great
He's a good coach.
Great coach.
He'd be a great coach if he could manage the fourth quarter in the playoffs.
I think he's top 5 with the weaknesses. I think he's a genius. I love Kyle Shanahan. So I'll defend him. I won't defend Sean McVay for his idiotic non-aggressiveness at the end of games sometimes. For some reason, I will for Kyle Shanahan, though.
We see things through the colored glasses we want to, I suppose.
Exactly.
The biggest thing for the 49ers moving forward here, they get out of this game, but Nick Bosa has a concussion, Fred Warner with the ankle injury. So they're really going to need those guys back next week if they want to have a shot against the Packers, I think. Let me scroll down. Yep, the Packers. So we'll keep an eye on that. Let's move on to another game here that we probably won't spend a lot of time on. Pittsburgh against Kansas City. They lose 42-21. The Chiefs started slow in this game. They found themselves in a 7-0 hole after a Steelers defensive touchdown. And then Mahomes answered with 5 touchdown passes in 10 minutes and 31 seconds of game time, which is just unbelievable. Like, I think they said the previous record was 5 touchdowns in like 25 minutes of game time or something by Brady. So just absurd. Mahomes goes 30 of 39 for 404 yards, 5 touchdowns. He does have 1 interception. It was off of a tipped ball. So you put an asterisk by that one. My biggest question from this game is to Andy Reid. Why do you burn your trick play with Jason Kelce throwing a touchdown out of the Wildcat when the game is already over? I just don't get, you just want to put it on film, I guess, and maybe that's the type of play they're not confident enough in to run in a game that matters, but they want people to have to prepare for that look is the only thing I can come up with.
Yeah, that's probably it. But they were probably just having fun, honestly, and doing something that they didn't even think would probably work. But it's funny. So I'll let you in on a little inside story here. I'll let the people in on. I'm a Mahomes guy. Everyone knows I love Mahomes. He was I call him my draft child. I loved him in his draft class. I thought Watson and Mahomes were the 2 best players in that draft class. And I thought both fell way too far. But Mahomes is incredible. I often say that he is the most talented quarterback to ever play the sport. Obviously, that's not me calling him the greatest or the GOAT or the best, or obviously doesn't have the resume. He's in his 4th year. But I often refer to him as the most talented quarterback to ever play the sport. My father, who is a fan of people like Joe Montana and others, and he's Peyton Manning, yells at me and goes on and on at me about that kind of stuff. And he gave me a call during the game when Mahomes was not playing well and when the Steelers were up 7-0. And was like, oh, this is the guy you said is the best of all time, because I had just said it on a radio hit on Fox PHL, The Gambler, calling Mahomes the most talented quarterback of all time that day. And he was like, this is the guy you're talking about. And at that point, literally from that point on, was when the 5 touchdown passes in 10 minutes happened. And I just thought it was very funny. Like, I stick behind my statement. Patrick Mahomes is the most talented quarterback.
Can we get him to call in during the next Eagles playoff game to you and complain about Jalen Hurts? And
he would love it too much, Shane. You don't even know. He would love it too much.
So the only other thing I'd say off of this game is TJ Watt's got to be Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, he ties the sack record despite missing a couple games with injury. He's got the tip that led to a pick. He had a touchdown off a fumble recovery in this game. He's just a phenomenal player. He should absolutely get Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, he absolutely should, even though I still think Aaron Donald's a better player. But TJ Watt's had a better year. That's what it is.
Okay, let's move on to the last game, the Arizona Cardinals at the Los Angeles Rams. It shows you why you wanted to play the Cardinals in the first round of the playoffs as they fall 34-11. And I want to share this tweet from the Action Network. Cliff Kingsbury's into the seasons as a head coach. Going back to 2013, Texas Tech, he lost 5 of 6. The next year lost 4 of his last 6, 4 of his last 6, 6 of his last 8, 6 of his last 8, 5 of his last 5. Got fired by Texas Tech, and then somehow got an NFL job, which I still don't understand. And then in his 3 years in Arizona, he's lost 7 of his last 9, 5 of his last 7, and 5 of his last 6, which led me to say, are you telling me that his teams, wait for it, they fell off a cliff?
Oh,
I knew you would hate that, so I had to put it up on the screen and get your reaction there.
That's my reaction. No, but yeah, Cliff Kingsbury stinks. That guy's not a good coach.
Yeah, they have got to get somebody in there. On the Rams side, Matthew Stafford finally played a clean game, and you see what the offense can do, what the defense can do when that happens. They were clicking on all cylinders. All their big names were out in force. OBJ had a good game. Stafford was clean. Kupp had 61 yards and a touchdown. Von Miller got a sack. At one point in this game, Odell Beckham Jr. had more passing yards than Kyler Murray, if you want to know how this game went, if you didn't watch it. And on top of all that, the Rams running game got going. Cam Akers came back. He had a really good game, which is phenomenal that he came back 6 months off an Achilles tear. And that's a big deal, especially given the fact that you can never fully trust Stafford. You need that to be able to work, if Stafford is having one of those off games.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams, they showed that when Stafford's right, when Stafford's not making mistakes, and when the defense is playing up to their potential, that this team's as good as any in the NFL. And it's going to be really fun to see what happens in Rams Bucs. I think that's a great game. And you think of the fact that they have the best receiver in the world right now, in Cooper Kupp. In terms of the stats he put up, it was one of the best receiver seasons of all time, and that helps the offense so much because it opens things up for Odell. It opens things up for the running back and Cam Akers, and it really does make Matthew Stafford's job a whole hell of a lot easier. So it'll be interesting to see if Stafford's able to play as clean of football against better opponents moving forward. That's basically going to decide their season, in my opinion. So, and I just talked about all that going on in the offense. That's not paying attention to the fact that they have a generational player in Von Miller, a generational cornerback in Jalen Ramsey, and not to mention the fact that I think the best defensive player in the world in Aaron Donald. So, I mean, the Rams, they have the pieces to go all the way, and if they don't, it's an abject failure. With the draft capital that they've invested, they've basically said if we don't win a Super Bowl in one of these next 2 or 3 years, it's a failure. And with what's going to happen to the cap for them over the next couple of years, they're not going to have as many guys as they have this year. So this is their chance to win it if they want to.
Yeah. Joe Ciccoletti chiming in. He says Odell and his dad, I guess, were right. He's been playing outstanding there so far. Good for him to see Odell getting back to his own ways. Do they stand a chance in Tampa?
Definitely.
Maybe. And yeah, we're gonna get into that. But before we do, we're gonna take a break here before we go into our preview, and we're gonna play a little bit of matchmaker with some of the teams that are open and some of the head coaching candidates that are out there. And so, Mark, why don't you lead us off here and you match us up one of these open teams with a head coach?
So I'll try to kind of explain it here. We're both going to take 4 openings here. I'm going to draft first, and then Shane's going to go second. And we're going to take whatever team we want and match it up with a head coaching candidate that we think fits best. I'm going to try to keep it with guys that these teams have interviewed, but we'll see how far that goes. And I'm going to start with one that I've talked about a lot, and that's the Jags matching up with Doug Peterson, which I think is the perfect fit. You put Doug Peterson there with Trevor Lawrence, and Doug Peterson bringing in an NFL culture to what he'd bring to Jacksonville is such a step up from what Urban Meyer was bringing with his nonsense last offseason and throughout this year, and the terrible staff that he had. And I think that it was just so dysfunctional that Doug Peterson, the culture that he'll provide, and whatever weaknesses he has, he is a Super Bowl winning coach who made the playoffs in 75% of the, or I guess in 3 of the 5, in 60% of the years that he coached. So I think that Doug Peterson is a no-brainer hire here for Jacksonville. So that's my first pick here as the Jags GM. I'm hiring Doug Peterson.
Yeah, I'm with you. You do great with the culture, great with instilling a culture, developing a quarterback. Only problem is they drafted Travis Etienne in the first round. They might as well trade him because Doug's not running the football.
We'll use him in the pass game.
There you go. Use him in the pass game. Okay, so I'm gonna take over the Chicago Bears franchise.
I knew you would.
I'm gonna take the Bears. They got my man Justin Fields, and they're gonna add Brian DeBall as their head coach here. Seeing what he's done with Josh Allen, Justin Fields isn't the exact same mold as Josh Allen, but they're both mobile quarterbacks. They both have good deep balls. Fields doesn't have quite the arm that Allen does, but I would argue he comes into the league as a lot better passer than Josh Allen did. I think it's a perfect fit there. They've got the offensive tackles. They've got some weapons. They really need to shore up that interior offensive line. But when you just drafted a franchise quarterback, you want to take a guy, you base the hire around someone developing him. And I love DeBall for that spot.
Yeah, that's a great hire. I think that's what Bears fans really want. I think they really want Daboll, and how could you not after what we saw him do in that game? So I'm stuck between 2 picks here. I'm going to go with the Denver Broncos. It's not my favorite job on the board, but it's someone that they interviewed, and it's someone who has long deserved a shot at this, and I'm going to give it to Eric Bieniemy. Not only would they take him from Kansas City, but I think that he would bring a little bit of stability, and I think Denver should really go with someone that can shore up the offensive side of the football. Like, I'm hearing they want to hire a guy like Dan Quinn. He's one of the front runners, and it's like, why would you fire Vic Fangio to hire Dan Quinn? It makes absolutely no sense to me. They should go on the offensive side of the ball. He's a Colorado University legend, Eric Bieniemy, one of the best players in their football history. He was a good player in the NFL too. He's a good running back for Colorado. So makes a lot of sense. He's from the area. Bring him back, Bieniemy, to Denver.
All right. I like it, especially weakening a division rival there. You've got to love that. Okay, so I am going to go with I'm going to sit in the GM chair for the Miami Dolphins. And I'm going to go hire I've got it down to 2 guys here. Who do I want? I'm going to hire Joe Brady as the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins front office clearly believes that Tua is their guy. That's why they fired Flores, because Flores didn't want to work with him. I seriously have my doubts about Tua. But if you want to see what you've got, you go hire a QB guru. I think Joe Brady is that. I think it'd be a great hire for them. I don't think you can come back with a defensive head coach here. It's got to be someone that's you're solely hiring them to try to develop Tua. And so I think Brady's that guy.
Yeah, I like the hire. I'm a huge Joe Brady guy. Where I think they're going to go is the guy they interviewed today, which is Mike McDaniel. He's an offensive coordinator for the 49ers. He's like a Yale offensive coordinator. And if you have some time today, look up some of his interviews. They're very funny. He's like a very chill, laid back, hippie kind of guy who people say is one of the smartest guys. Shanahan says he's like an absolute football genius. And apparently he's been a big part of the whole Deebo Samuel transformation. So it looks like that's what they're going to go with. But Joe Chick said, you can't convince me otherwise. Mark Henry and Mike McDaniel are related. They look identical, long lost brothers. That's pretty funny. I never thought
hit him up for
that.
a scouting job.
That's pretty funny. I like that. But I'm gonna go with the same kind of vibe here. I'm gonna be the Minnesota Vikings GM, and I'm gonna reach into the division, and I'm gonna take the Green Bay Packers offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett. And I'm going to kind of weaken that. I'm going to, that's going to piss Aaron Rodgers off. Maybe he'll want to leave the division. So that'll weaken Green Bay.
Maybe he'll want to come to Minnesota.
Yeah.
Follow the legacy of Brett Favre, leaving Green Bay and going to Minnesota.
I like that. But I like the hire for Hackett, not because of what he's done in Green Bay. But if you look back, the guy was the OC for Blake Bortles, and they went to the AFC Championship game. And look up some of those numbers Blake Bortles was putting up. He was like a top 5 fantasy quarterback one year. So I think what he did with Bortles was incredibly impressive. And I think the Jags interviewed him, so it would make sense if they hired him too, since they were able to see what he was able to do years ago. But Hackett's a guy who's going to get a job, I think. And if I was the Vikings, I'd seriously consider him.
All right, I'm going to sit in the GM chair for the New York. Well, they don't have a GM, but I'm going to be the owner for the Giants, and I'm going to hire my head coach since I don't have a GM anyways, and I'm going to hire Brian Leftwich. I think it's pretty clear that Daniel Jones is not the guy. I think that the Giants want to give it one more go, and so again, I'm going to put him in the best possible place to succeed. And if they decide to draft a quarterback with one of their 2 high picks, you still got a guy in Leftwich who's been working with Brady for a couple of years now. And you hope that he can either do something with Jones or that he can take a rookie quarterback under his wing. I don't love the job there in New York. I think they're in pretty poor shape. But if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything. And I think Leftwich might be able to work something out there, either with a rookie or less likely with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, Leftwich is a great candidate, and I'll go with another terrible job here. I'll be the Houston Texans GM, and I'll hire Brian Flores because I'm not a huge Flores guy. I think you can argue that he deserved to be fired, but with what the Texans have, they have no culture, so he's not going to clash with any culture. And if Nick Caserio or Jack Easter, actually, if I'm the Texans GM now, I'm getting rid of Nick Caserio, who's also like the president, and getting rid of Jack Easterby, who went from being like a team chaplain to being the GM in some fell swoop where I don't know. Jack Easterby does not strike me as a guy who deserves his job. But the Texans organization is a joke anyway. Hire Brian Flores. He'll get the most out of your team. Maybe like a guy David Coley did. But anyway, they shouldn't have fired Coley. Bring in Flores. He's a New England guy anyway. They seem to want to hire a New England guy. It's probably going to be Gerard Mayo, but I'll hire Flores.
All right. And then that leaves the Raiders. I'm going to hire Todd Bowles to be the head coach of the Raiders. I don't know what they're going to do with Carr. I don't know if he's the future or not, but I know when you bring in Bowles, you're going to bring in a guy who's going to have a really good defense, and they've got some really good pieces on defense, especially in the trenches with Max Crosby and Yannick Ngakoue. Mm-hmm. I trust him to build the defense up, and he's been around the league long enough. I trust him to have the connections to bring in a good offensive play caller. So Todd Bowles to Las Vegas to coach the Raiders.
I like that a lot. And just before we move on, I will say Dennis Allen is a guy that's not getting any interviews. He was the Saints DC. We saw what he did twice against Brady this year and twice last year. He failed 10 years ago as the Raiders head coach. I think it's ridiculous. He's not getting any interviews. He's not going to obviously go to the Raiders because they fired him 10 years ago. But Dennis Allen, he's a guy that's getting disrespected. That's the last guy on my list that we didn't mention, so I wanted to bring him up. But I actually think we're going to do a quick little preview here. Shane might have to drop off, but if that's the case, I'll finish it out. But let's move on to a quick little preview for divisional round.
All right, so divisional round previews. If you did not listen to episode 38, go back and check that out. I did that one solo, but I did a deep dive into how a lot of these teams, with the exception of the 1 seeds, how they can succeed in the playoffs. And a lot of that's applicable. So if you want a little more in depth, you can go listen to some of those, but we'll run through these quickly here. We've got Cincinnati at Tennessee. To me, this game comes down to one thing, and that's how healthy is Derrick Henry. Is he going to come back rested, or is he going to come back rusty, having not played with the foot injury for so long? For Tennessee to win, they've got to be able to pound the rock and keep the ball away from Cincinnati's offense. You do not want Ryan Tannehill in a shootout with Joe Burrow. It's not going to go well. Now, the Bengals generally have a good run defense. The Titans generally have a bad pass defense. And so to me, seeding aside, I think Cincinnati, this game is a very advantageous matchup for them. And again, I mentioned Trey Hendrickson earlier, how vital he is. It's looking like he's going to play. So I've got Cincinnati in this game.
So let's just have you let's have you keep rolling with your picks, and I'll jump in with my stats once you have to hop off.
Okay, cool. So I'll roll on to Buffalo at Kansas City. The Chiefs won the AFC title game last year. The Bills won 38-20 in Week 5 this year. The Chiefs have gone 11-2 since then. They haven't played like the same team they did early in the year. I still think it comes down to how do you defend the Bills. The Chiefs like to play man coverage, but corners with their back turned to Allen, especially now that they've cut him loose to run, is a nightmare. So if you want to play man coverage, you have to spy Josh Allen, but there's nobody on this roster that's going to spy Josh Allen. And so you arrive at playing zone, which isn't really what the Chiefs are built to do. I just think it's a bad matchup for the Chiefs defense. Now, Patrick Mahomes can cover up a lot of those inefficiencies in your defense, but you can't start slow like you did against Pittsburgh. And if the Chiefs start slow in this game, I think this game's going to be a shootout. And I think if the Chiefs wait a quarter to start playing, they'll never catch up. And I said it earlier, I think the only person that can beat the Bills right now is Josh Allen. And I never fully trust him, but I trust him enough in this one. I'm going to take the Bills to go to Arrowhead and win. I do think the one thing to watch for in this, though, is that potential letdown. The Bills, they win the division. They embarrass the Patriots, who have been the monkey on their back for so long last week. And so they've got to come out ready to go. And I think they will. Their whole offseason was built around beating the Chiefs. So I don't think they're going to let that get to them, but we'll see. Moving on, San Francisco at Green Bay. Rodgers has never beaten the 49ers in the playoffs. He's 0-3 against the 49ers, but this is the first time they will meet at Lambeau Field. I think Green Bay is a better coached team. You might disagree with me there, but I think Green Bay is a better coach team, and I think that San Francisco comes into this game with a lot of question marks injury-wise. Is Bosa going to play? Is Warner going to play? Those are huge mitigating factors. The 49ers need to be at full strength. I will take Aaron Rodgers over Jimmy G any day. Of course, I would take Dak Prescott over Jimmy G any day too, but I do think the Packers get this done on their home field. And then the last one here, the Rams at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa lost to the Rams 32-24 earlier in the season. I think this game ultimately comes down to Matthew Stafford. The Rams are far and away healthier. Like, they should win this game. But I can't shake the feeling that you're always just like a half a second away from a Matthew Stafford implosion. And then on the injury side, Tristan Wirfs plays a huge role in this game. You saw Ryan Kerrigan, a guy who everybody forgot played for the Eagles, get 2 sacks against the backup right tackle in this game. If Wirfs can play at 100%, that's going to be huge. And if not, Von Miller's a lot better than Ryan Kerrigan is. So I'm going to take the Rams in this game. I don't feel great about taking the Rams in this game. This game is so up in the air to me, especially with just the inevitability that is a coming Matthew Stafford implosion. You don't know when it's going to happen, but it is going to happen. It's inevitable. It's just, will it be this weekend? So I'm going to take the Rams. I'm scared about it, though.
Yeah, we're together on the Bengals pick. I'm against you with I've got the Chiefs and the 49ers. But then with that game, I don't even have a take yet. I need to crunch the numbers. Like, I need to look at some models and stuff and try to find some trends that make me feel confident in a side or a total on that game, because I can't find a bet that I like on that game. I believe that the spread is somewhere around Bucs -2.5 at home. I have no idea what to think on that game, but and the 49ers, I don't feel that confidently about beating them, which I'll dive into with the stats. I'd like them to cover the spread, and if I, gun to my head, I'd probably pick the 49ers to win. But then the one that we do disagree on is the Chiefs and the Bills. But I'll get into that, and maybe Shane will listen on the podcast here. But I think Shane has to hop off, and then I'm gonna nerd out with some stats. So Shane, you got some plugs for us?
Yeah, just give me a follow on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. Make sure you're following the podcast on Apple, iTunes. Give us 5-star rating and review. Mark is going to take it home for you guys. I've got to go pick my kids up from school, but Mark, I'll listen later and I'll yell at you about everything you're wrong at. So
of course.
I'm out of here. I'll catch you guys next week for another review. We'll do some Eagles talk. Mark, you take it home.
Thank you to Shane, as always, for hosting Chalk Talk, because now you guys are stuck with me. But We'll bring it home with some stats. I won't keep you here that long. It'll probably be about 5 minutes here. And this is a little preview of the Tough Cover podcast. You'll get some of the gambling trends that I'm seeing here. And I just kind of gave away my picks a little bit right there. But starting off where Shane started off, we're talking about Bengals Titans. And I like Bengals plus 3.5 at the Titans. And this is veering into a potential early game of the year for me, which don't tell anyone. But this may be a game of the year, huge play for me. The Bengals are 6-2 against the spread on the road, 5-3 as an underdog this year, 4-1 against the spread as a road underdog. Bengals have covered 5 straight coming into this game, so 5-0 in the last 5 against the spread, and I am very juiced up on Cincinnati because of the electric weapons of the Bengals offense and the fact that I don't even feel like those weapons really unleashed last week. Like I said earlier, I think they played a C plus B minus game, and I think that we haven't seen the scariest version of the Bengals yet, and that is why I took the Bengals plus 850 to win the AFC before the Raiders game, because I loved the way that the bracket broke to get the Raiders in the first round and to get Tennessee in the second round. I thought that could be, a very good spot to be in for a 4 seed. And this bet has more to do with Tennessee than Cincinnati. So let me get into the other part of this bet, which is the other side, because I think Tennessee is the most vulnerable 1 seed I've ever seen. That near collapse Texans game in week 18 told me so much about the Tennessee Titans. Davis Mills was dicing them up. And, as a member of Mills Mafia, I would say that Joe Burrow is just a little bit better. Props to Mike Vrabel. I'm happy to see Derrick Henry back, but I don't believe in the Titans to get this done and to win even as a 1 seed with home field advantage here. You'd think the team that's the 1 seed in a tough AFC would be really good, especially as a favorite against the spread. But the Titans are only 4-4 against the spread as a favorite. It's pretty funny to see the fact that the Titans went 12-5 this year. They're the 1 seed in the AFC. They were only favored in 8 of their 17 games. They were underdogs more often than they were favorites this year. And they're the 1 seed. That's what I mean by saying this is the most vulnerable 1 seed I've ever seen. Tennessee is not beloved by DVOA metrics. If you look at any of the advanced metrics, it'll tell you the same thing, that Tennessee is very vulnerable. And that's why they're only a 3.5 point favorite here against a very flawed Bengals team, but a very exciting Bengals team. And Shane Half said Burrow is going to throw for 500 yards if he gets a chance. I completely agree. The Titans pass defense is a serious problem. They are pretty good against the rush, so that should shut Joe Mixon down, but I don't see any scenario where they keep Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd quiet at all. I love the Bengals in this game. And also a fun little historic trend or stat here. This goes for this game, and it'll lead into our next game. In the divisional round, underdogs are 23-12-1 against the spread against the number 1 seed. So let's go to the next pick that applies to, which is 49ers plus 6 at the Packers. And this is a couple stats for my guy, Kyle Shanahan, who Shane was just besmirching earlier. If he's in the comments, he can listen to these Kyle Shanahan stats, because that's the main reason I'm going with the 49ers here, is because of Kyle Shanahan. He is a phenomenal underdog against the spread. Kyle Shanahan is 27-17 27-17 against the spread as an underdog, including 13-4 against the spread as an underdog since 2019. And that's including games with such luminaries as CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins. So together, head coach Kyle Shanahan and quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo are 10-3 against the spread as road underdogs. And then we have the matchup, which in my opinion is a nightmare for Green Bay. DVOA is not the end-all be-all, but it actually says that San Francisco is a better team than Green Bay, and it matches up quite favorably with Green Bay. As we all know, Kyle Shanahan teams are going to be able to run the ball, and whether that be Elijah Mitchell or Deebo Samuel or others. And you look at the other side of the ball for Green Bay, the defense ranked 22nd in DVOA this season, but more importantly, they ranked 28th against the run in DVOA on defense. And they also ranked 28th in DVOA versus opposing tight ends. We'll say hello to George Kittle. I think this is a very, very bad matchup for Green Bay. San Fran just has way too many weapons, and I think we saw that against Dallas. And like I said, I don't think we've seen the best or scariest version of San Fran yet. Shane stole my stat. that Aaron Rodgers is 0-3 against his childhood favorite team, the San Francisco 49ers. I think it moves to 0-4. So I like the 49ers not only to cover, but to win this game. And can we, I was going to bring this up with Shane. I forgot to. If Jimmy G goes on a run and they go to the Super Bowl and then they trade him, whether they win it or lose it, and then they trade him and start Trey Lance, I think we need a 30 for 30 on Jimmy G's career. Just an insane career coming from Western Illinois or wherever he came from. And then he's the heir apparent that was drafted to be the guy after Tom Brady like a decade ago now. He sits behind Tom Brady. He has a little stint there where he plays. He has the feud with Tom Brady and Alex Guerrero or whatever that was. And then obviously goes to San Francisco and he goes to the Super Bowl, and then they give up on him. They give up all their assets to get Trey Lance, but he's still starting. If they win the NFC just out of spite, Jimmy G needs a 30 for 30. That would be it's an incredible story. So seeing Jimmy G help the Niners win a title out of spite is one of the outcomes I'm pulling for this year. I think it'd be very, very funny, very comical. Yeah. Shane says Jimmy G has as weird of a career arc as Nick Foles, and he didn't know that Aaron Rodgers, that the 49ers were his childhood team. Maybe I'm wrong there. I believe that that's true. I believe his childhood team was the 49ers, same with Tom Brady. So let's move on to the next game, which is, in my opinion, the game of the weekend, and is Bills Chiefs. And before I get to the pick on the game, doesn't this seem like the definition of a game to sit back, relax, and take the over and enjoy the points and just root for touchdowns? Because that's what's going to happen in this game. Such dynamic offenses, such great quarterbacks, such great play callers in Bieniemy and Brian Daboll and Andy Reid on Kansas City, obviously with Bieniemy. And then you got Stephon Diggs as a weapon for Buffalo and an emerging running game for Buffalo. You've obviously got the best tight end in football in Travis Kelce, the scariest wide receiver in football in Tyreek Hill, and the emergence of Jerick Jet McKinnon. Give me the over all day long, and the trends back it up. The over is 4-2 in the last 6 Bills games, and they have scored no lower than 27 in that stretch. And this Chiefs offense is rolling in a way that we haven't seen in quite a long time, averaging 36.5 points per game in the last 6 games. Chiefs team total overs have been a cash cow for me, it was my best bet of Super Wildcard weekend. It did hit, but I'm just going to bet the full game over here at 54.5 Bills Chiefs, because full game overs are 6-0 in the last 6 Chief games that they've averaged 36.5 points per game. And those numbers offensively for the Chiefs are ultimately why I lean Chiefs -2 here. It's my least confident play of these 4, but I've never bet against Patrick Mahomes in his football career, and I'm not about to start now. And just a quick little stat about the fact that Patrick Mahomes is pretty good at football. The guy just moved to 57-15 in his first 72 games. So that means if you bet against Patrick Mahomes to win a football game, you're wrong 80% of the time. That is just unbelievable. When Mahomes is a 3-point favorite or shorter or an underdog, he is 14-4-1 against the spread and 9-2 in his last 11 straight up. I just think KC has slightly more firepower offensively with Kelce and Hill, and I think people are valuing last week's incredible performance from Buffalo and the earlier matchup of this season a bit too much, and I think there could be some value to be had on the Chiefs, because this line should be probably up around 4 or 5. People are seeming to forget that the Chiefs have been to 2 straight Super Bowls and have been to 3 straight AFC Championship games. If D4 didn't jump offside, they would be the back-to-back-to-back AFC champions. And there was an adage coined by a man named Ric Flair. To be the man, you've got to beat the man. And Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the Chiefs are still the man in the AFC. Last year when these teams met in the AFC title game when it mattered, the Bills got up early and the Chiefs went on a 38-6 scoring run, won the game 38-24. I think it'll be a little high scoring and a little closer, but very similar and just as much of a shootout. I think the Chiefs win 38-35. I think it's going to be a great game, but I think the Chiefs win, and I think the over cashes, and that does it for me. And you can follow me at Mark Henry Jr. _ You can follow Shane at Half and Half TPL, and you can follow the Painted Lines at the Painted Lines, and you can subscribe to the Painted Lines where you're watching this on YouTube and put on post notifications. So I'm wrapping it up for me, for Shane. Thanks for listening. Good night, everybody. I don't know. I don't have a sign. I forget what Shane's sign off is all of a sudden. I'm sitting here. I don't know what his sign off is. Mine is enjoy the winners. Doesn't really apply here. So thanks for listening. And thanks for, chalking it up with us. that is a terrible, terrible outro. I'm coming up on the spot here. I'm trying to think of a better outro here. Oh man. I don't have one. Thanks for I don't have one. Thanks for chalking it up with us. And we'll be back next week with a preview and a review.